Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Earth's orbital defense station and watched the holographic display with growing concern. The alien ships filled the screen like angry red dots, each one representing a threat that humanity could barely understand. As commander of the Earth Defense Force, Jake had trained for this moment his entire career, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of first contact with a hostile alien fleet. The communication channel crackled to life, and the translator worked to convert the alien language into something humans could understand. The voice that emerged was cold and mechanical, lacking any emotion that Jake could recognize. "Primitive species of the third planet," the voice announced. "You will surrender your world's resources immediately. Resistance will result in complete destruction." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all young, barely out of training, and their faces showed the same mixture of fear and determination that he felt in his own chest. Earth had been preparing for this possibility ever since the first radio signals from space had been detected 5 years ago, but their weapons seemed like toys compared to what was approaching. "Send a response," Jake ordered his communications officer, a nervous young woman named Katie Bell who had transferred from the medical corps just 6 months earlier. "Tell them we need time to consider their demands." Katie's hands shook as she worked the controls. "Sir, I don't think they're interested in negotiation. Their fleet is moving into attack formation." Down on Earth's surface, Dr. Lisa Carter was frantically reviewing her research data in the underground laboratory beneath the Pacific Research Institute. For the past 10 years, she had been studying human genetics and evolution, trying to understand what made humanity unique among Earth species. Her work had revealed some interesting patterns, but she had never imagined it would become relevant to humanity's survival. The emergency alert system began broadcasting across all channels, and Lisa could hear the panic in the announcer's voice as he described the approaching alien fleet. She looked at her computer screen where decades of research data scrolled past in neat rows of numbers and charts. Somewhere in that data was the key to understanding humanity's true potential, but there was no time left to analyze it properly. Lisa grabbed her portable drive and began copying everything to the emergency broadcast system. If humanity was about to be destroyed, at least their knowledge would survive in the deep space probes that had been launched as a precaution. She typed quickly, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. "Computer, initiate. Emergency Protocol 7, she said aloud. "Transmit all research data to probe network immediately." On the other side of the planet, Captain Alex Rodriguez was coordinating the evacuation of civilian populations from major cities. His transport ship could only carry 200 people at a time, and there were millions who needed to be moved to safety. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. There was not enough time to save everyone. Alex had been a pilot for 15 years, flying everything from cargo haulers to military fighters, but he had never faced a situation like this. The aliens had technology that could destroy entire planets, while humanity was still struggling to establish permanent colonies on Mars. It seemed impossible that Earth could survive what was coming. "Rodriguez to ground control," he spoke into his radio. "I've got another load of civilians ready for transport to the underground shelters. How many more runs can we make before they arrive?" The voice that answered was strained with exhaustion. "Maybe 6 more hours, Alex. The alien fleet will be in weapon range by then." In the city below, ordinary people were discovering something extraordinary about themselves. Maria Santos, an elementary school teacher from Denver, had organized the evacuation of her entire neighborhood using nothing but her experience managing classroom emergencies. She moved from house to house, helping families pack essential supplies and coordinating with other volunteers to ensure that no one was left behind. Maria had never considered herself a leader, but something about the crisis brought out abilities she didn't know she possessed. She could see patterns in the chaos, finding solutions to problems that seemed impossible just minutes before. When the transport vehicles ran out of fuel, she organized teams to siphon gas from abandoned cars. When the communication system failed, she set up a network of runners to carry messages between evacuation points. Tony Walsh was working in his garage when the emergency broadcasts began, and his first instinct was to start building. He had been a mechanic his entire adult life, fixing cars and trucks for his neighbors, but now he found himself creating weapons from spare parts and household items. His hands moved with a confidence that surprised him, assembling devices that he had never seen before but somehow knew would work. "Sarah, come help me with this," he called to his daughter, who was home from college for the summer. "We're going to need every advantage we can get." Sarah Walsh had been studying engineering, and she quickly understood what her father was trying to accomplish. Together, they began converting civilian vehicles into mobile defense platforms, mounting improvised weapons and communication equipment. Neither of them had any military training, but they worked with the focused intensity of people who had found their true purpose. The alien fleet continued its approach, and monitoring stations around the world reported the same information. Humanity was facing an enemy with technology centuries ahead of their own. The logical response would have been surrender or evacuation, but humans seemed incapable of accepting either option. Instead, they prepared to fight with whatever tools they could find. Jake Morrison received reports from around the globe describing similar scenes of ordinary people transforming into something more than they had been before. Teachers became tactical coordinators, mechanics became weapons designers, and farmers became strategic planners. It was as if the approaching threat had awakened something that had been sleeping in the human spirit. The first alien ships entered Earth's atmosphere just as the sun was setting over the Pacific Ocean, their hulls glowing with energy that no human technology could match. But below them, humanity was preparing to demonstrate that primitive did not mean powerless, and that sometimes the greatest strength comes from having nothing left to lose. The first attack came at dawn. Jake Morrison watched from the orbital station as beams of pure energy struck the major cities of Earth. New York vanished in a flash of white light that lasted only seconds. London, Tokyo, and Sydney followed within minutes. The alien weapons turned concrete and steel into glass, leaving nothing but smooth craters where millions of people had lived and worked. Jake's communication officer, Katie Bell, was crying as she tried to maintain contact with the remaining defense stations. Her voice shook as she reported each new loss. "Sir, we've lost contact with the European defense grid. The Asian stations went dark 30 seconds ago. The alien fleet moved with mechanical precision, targeting military installations and population centers according to some predetermined plan." Jake realized that this was not a battle but an extermination. The aliens had decided that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to survive, even as slaves. "All stations, this is Morrison," he broadcast on the emergency channel. "Execute scatter protocol immediately. Get our people to the underground shelters and prepare for extended resistance operations." On the surface, General Robert Hayes was coordinating the defense from a bunker deep beneath the ruins of Denver. The facility had been built during the Cold War to survive nuclear attack, but it was never designed to withstand the kind of weapons that were destroying the planet above. Every few minutes, the entire structure shook as another city was erased from existence. Hayes looked at the tactical display and tried to make sense of what he was seeing. His military training told him that the situation was hopeless, but something deeper refused to accept defeat. He had spent 40 years in the army, fighting in conflicts around the world, but he had never faced an enemy like this. "Colonel Martin, what's the status of the civilian evacuation?" Hayes asked his communications. Officer Chris Martin was a career soldier who had served in 3 wars, and Hayes had never seen him look worried before today. "Sir, we've managed to get about 60% of the remaining population into the deep shelters. The problem is that the aliens seem to know where our installations are located." Hayes nodded grimly. The enemy had been studying Earth for longer than anyone had realized, mapping human civilization with the patience of scientists preparing for an experiment. Every military base, every government facility, every major population center was being destroyed with surgical precision. In the ruins of what had once been Chicago, Maria Santos was leading a group of survivors through the smoking wreckage. The elementary school teacher had somehow kept 37 people alive through the initial bombardment, and now she was moving them toward one of the underground shelters that might still be intact. Maria had never been in a war zone before, but she found that her experience managing children had prepared her for this in unexpected ways. She could read the emotional state of her group at a glance, knowing when someone was about to panic or collapse. She distributed food and water with the same efficiency she had once used to handle school supplies, making sure that everyone received exactly what they needed. "Mrs. Santos, I can hear more ships coming," said Danny Clark, a young man who had been working construction before the attack. He had sharp ears and quick reflexes that made him valuable as a scout. Maria listened carefully and heard the distant rumble of alien engines. "Everyone stay quiet and follow me. We're going to move through the subway tunnels. The aliens might not know about all of them yet." She led the group into the darkness below the city, using her phone's flashlight to navigate through passages that had been abandoned when the power grid failed. Behind them, the sound of destruction continued as the aliens systematically eliminated every trace of human civilization from the surface. Dr. Lisa Carter was still in her laboratory, working frantically to complete the data transmission to the deep space probes. The alien attack had damaged most of the communication satellites, but she had managed to establish a connection through the remaining networks. Her research on human genetics was almost completely uploaded when the facility began to shake. Lisa looked at her computer screen and saw that she had perhaps 10 more minutes before the transmission was complete. Above her, she could hear the sound of approaching aircraft, and she knew that the aliens had finally located her research facility. She opened her desk drawer and took out a small device that she had hoped never to use. The electromagnetic pulse generator would destroy all the equipment in the laboratory, but it would also ensure that the aliens could not capture her research data. If humanity was going to survive, they would need every advantage they could find. "Computer, increase transmission speed to maximum," she ordered. "Priority override authorization Carter Alpha 7. Tony Walsh and his daughter Sarah had turned their garage into a weapons factory, producing improvised explosives and communication devices for the local resistance groups. They worked side by side, their hands moving with practiced efficiency as they assembled devices that could disrupt alien equipment. Tony had discovered that human technology, while primitive compared to alien systems, could still cause problems for the invaders. The aliens had designed their equipment to work perfectly in controlled conditions, but they had not anticipated the creative ways that humans could interfere with electronic systems. Sarah was monitoring the radio channels, listening to reports from resistance groups around the world. "Dad, there's something strange happening. The people who are fighting back seem to be getting better at it. Like they're learning faster than they should be able to." Tony paused in his work and looked at his daughter. He had noticed the same thing in himself. Tasks that should have taken hours to learn were becoming clear within minutes. It was as if the crisis had awakened abilities that had been sleeping in the human mind. The final assault began as the sun set on what remained of human civilization. The alien fleet deployed, massive ships that began breaking apart Earth's crust with weapons that turned rock into lava. The planet itself was dying, splitting apart in a chain reaction that would consume everything within days. Jake Morrison made the hardest decision of his life as he watched his world die. Using the last functioning transport ships, he began evacuating the survivors to any vessel that could reach escape velocity. Thousands of people crammed into ships designed for hundreds, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs and the determination to survive. As the evacuation ships fled into deep space, Earth continued to break apart behind them. The aliens had succeeded in destroying humanity's home, but they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that destroying Earth would break the human spirit, but instead, they had removed the last thing that was holding humanity back from discovering what they were truly capable of becoming. 6 months after Earth's destruction, Jake Morrison stood in the cargo bay of a converted alien transport ship and tried to understand what was happening to his people. The survivors should have been broken by the loss of their world, but instead, they seemed to be becoming something more than human. The changes had started small. Pete Johnson, who had been a simple engineer before the war, could now interface directly with alien computer systems without any training. He placed his hands on the control panels and somehow understood how they worked, as if the technology was speaking to him in a language he had always known. "I don't understand it myself, Commander," Pete explained as he worked on the ship's navigation system. "When I touch these controls, I can see the information flowing through the circuits. It's like watching water move through pipes, except the water is made of light and numbers." Jake watched Pete's hands move across the alien interface with impossible precision. The young man was making modifications to systems that Earth's best scientists had barely begun to understand. The ship's performance had improved by 30% since Pete had started working on it, and he was still discovering new capabilities every day. In the medical bay, Dr. Lisa Carter was studying the genetic samples she had managed to save from her destroyed laboratory. The data was revealing patterns that she had never noticed before, changes in human DNA that seemed to be accelerating since the evacuation from Earth. Amy Foster, who had been an accountant in her previous life, was helping Lisa analyze the data. Amy's mind worked like a computer now, processing vast amounts of information and finding connections that even advanced software might miss. She could look at a genetic sequence and immediately see how it related to dozens of other patterns in the data. The changes are not random, Amy reported as she reviewed the latest test results. Every human we've tested is developing new capabilities, but they're all related to survival and adaptation. It's as if our genetic code was waiting for the right trigger to activate dormant sequences. Lisa nodded as she looked at the evidence. Her research before Earth's destruction had suggested that humans possessed unusual evolutionary flexibility, but she had never imagined anything like this. The trauma of losing their world had somehow unlocked genetic potential that had been hidden for thousands of years. The refugee fleet consisted of 12 ships, each one crowded with survivors who were struggling to build new lives in the emptiness of space. But something remarkable was happening in each vessel. Humans were not just adapting to their new environment, they were transforming it. Maria Santos had become the unofficial leader of the largest civilian group, using skills that seemed to come from nowhere. She could look at a group of people and instantly understand their strengths, weaknesses, and emotional needs. Her ability to organize and motivate had grown far beyond what any normal human should possess. "We need to start thinking about what comes next," Maria told the council meeting she had organized. "We can't spend the rest of our lives running from ship to ship. We need to find a way to fight back." The council included survivors from every profession imaginable, but they all shared the same burning desire for justice. The aliens had not just destroyed Earth, they had awakened something in humanity that demanded revenge. The survivors were not interested in finding a new home and hiding. They wanted to make the aliens pay for what they had done. Danny Clark had become the fleet's chief scout, using modified shuttles to explore nearby star systems for resources and potential threats. His reflexes had become so fast that he could navigate asteroid fields that would challenge the best computer pilots. He seemed to anticipate dangers before they appeared, as if he could see slightly into the future. "Commander Morrison, I've found something interesting in the Kepler system," Danny reported over the communication channel. "There's a damaged alien supply depot orbiting the 7th planet. Looks like it was abandoned after some kind of battle." Jake felt his pulse quicken. The fleet desperately needed supplies and equipment, but more importantly, they needed to start striking back at their enemies. Every alien facility they could capture or destroy would send a message that humanity was not going to disappear quietly into the darkness. Tony Walsh and his daughter Sarah had set up a weapons laboratory in the engineering section of their ship. They were creating devices that combined human ingenuity with alien technology, producing tools that neither species could have developed alone. Their creations were crude but effective, designed with the single purpose of causing maximum damage to alien equipment. "The key is to use their own technology against them," Tony explained to the group of volunteers he was training. "Alien systems are built to work perfectly under normal conditions, but they're not designed to handle the kind of creative interference that humans can provide." Sarah had become an expert at reverse engineering alien devices, taking them apart and rebuilding them according to human specifications. Her modified weapons could penetrate alien shields by using frequency patterns that the original designers had never considered. She worked with the focused intensity of someone who had found her true calling. The first major test came when the fleet encountered a group of alien refugees from a species called the Saurians. These reptilian beings had been fighting the same enemy that destroyed Earth, but they had given up hope after losing several battles. Their ships were damaged and their crews were demoralized. Jake decided to offer assistance, despite the protests of some survivors who wanted nothing to do with any alien species. The Saurians were suspicious at first, but they quickly discovered that humans brought more than just technical help. They brought something that the Saurians had lost: the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Captain Rex Scalehart, the Saurian commander, watched in amazement as human engineers repaired his ships using techniques that violated every principle of proper maintenance. "Your people work like they have nothing to lose," he observed. "That's because we don't," Jake replied. "Simply, when you've already lost everything, you become free to try anything." The alliance between humans and Saurians produced immediate results. The combined fleet began striking at isolated alien outposts, using tactics that made no sense to conventional military thinking. Humans would sacrifice valuable equipment to achieve minor tactical advantages, or retreat from winning battles to strike at targets that seemed strategically worthless, but turned out to be critical supply links. Word began to spread through the galaxy's underground networks. The humans from the destroyed world were not just surviving. They were winning battles that should have been impossible. Species that had been hiding from the war for decades began to whisper about the Earth Devils, who could turn any disaster into an opportunity for victory. Amy Foster analyzed the intelligence reports that were reaching the fleet through various alien contacts. The patterns she found were encouraging but also frightening. Human tactics were becoming legendary throughout the galaxy, but they were also attracting the attention of much more dangerous enemies. "We're not just fighting for revenge anymore," she reported to Jake. "We're becoming something that the entire galaxy will either follow or fear. There's no middle ground left for humanity." 2 years had passed since Earth's destruction, and Jake Morrison barely recognized the fleet he now commanded. What had started as 12 refugee ships had grown into a massive armada of over 200 vessels. Humans had not just survived. They had become the most feared military force in the galaxy. The transformation was complete. Pete Johnson now served as the fleet's chief technology officer, and his ability to understand alien systems had evolved beyond simple interface skills. He could look at enemy ships and immediately identify their weaknesses, designing weapons specifically tailored to exploit vulnerabilities that the aliens themselves did not know existed. "Commander, the new weapon systems are ready for testing," Pete reported as he stood in the main engineering bay of their flagship, a massive vessel that had been built from the remains of dozens of captured alien ships. "I've modified the plasma cannons to generate resonance frequencies that will overload Void Syndicate shield generators." Jake nodded and looked at the tactical display showing their next target. The Void Syndicate had established a major supply depot in the Centauri system, believing it was protected by their most advanced defensive systems. They were about to learn that human ingenuity could turn any advantage into a liability. Nicole Green sat in the pilot's seat of her modified fighter craft, running through pre-flight checks with the efficiency of someone who had been born to fly. Before Earth's destruction, she had been a commercial pilot flying passenger routes between cities. Now she could navigate through asteroid fields and energy storms that would destroy most computer-controlled ships. Her squadron consisted of 20 fighters, each one piloted by a human who had discovered extraordinary abilities after the evacuation. They flew in perfect coordination without using radio communication, as if they shared a collective consciousness that allowed them to anticipate each other's movements. "Squadron leaders, this is Green," she spoke into her helmet microphone. "We're going in fast and low. Remember, the goal is not just to destroy the depot, but to send a message. We want every alien in the galaxy to know that humans are coming. For them." The attack began at precisely 800 hours Galactic Standard Time. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their ships moving with a precision that seemed impossible for vessels that had been cobbled together from salvaged parts. The Void Syndicate defenders scrambled to respond, but they were already too late. Roy Baker's demolition team had infiltrated the depot 3 days earlier, using techniques that no alien security system had been designed to detect. Humans could move through ventilation systems, maintenance tunnels, and storage areas that other species would never consider as potential infiltration routes. They planted explosive devices in locations that would cause maximum damage to critical systems. The first explosions came from inside the depot itself, as Roy's charges destroyed the main power generators and communication arrays. The defensive weapons went offline just as Nicole's fighter squadron began their attack run. diving through the debris field with suicidal precision. General Robert Hayes watched the battle from the command center of the flagship, coordinating the assault with the calm efficiency of someone who had fought in dozens of similar engagements. The underground bunker where he had made his last stand on Earth seemed like a lifetime ago. Now he commanded a force that could challenge entire star systems. "Sir, the enemy is requesting permission to surrender," reported his communications officer. Hayes considered the request for exactly 3 seconds before responding. "Tell them that surrender was an option before they destroyed our world. Now they get to experience what humanity learned in those final days. Sometimes there is no escape from the consequences of your actions." The battle for the depot lasted only 47 minutes, but the psychological impact would resonate throughout the galaxy for years to come. Human forces had destroyed a facility that the Void Syndicate considered impregnable, using tactics that violated every principle of conventional warfare. Maria Santos was no longer just organizing civilian refugees. She had become the diplomatic coordinator for the growing alliance of species that were joining the human cause. Her ability to understand and motivate people had evolved into something approaching telepathy, allowing her to negotiate with alien cultures that had completely different ways of thinking. "The Crystalline Hive has agreed to provide manufacturing support," she reported to the Leadership Council. "In exchange, we've promised to help them reclaim their homeworld from Syndicate occupation. The Zephyrians want to discuss energy-sharing technology, and the Grayan traders are offering to establish supply lines through neutral territory." The alliance was growing faster than anyone had expected. Species that had been enemies for centuries were putting aside their differences to join the human crusade against the Void Syndicate. It was not just about military cooperation. Humans seemed to inspire other species to become better versions of themselves. Danny Clark had evolved from a scout into something resembling a prophet of war. His ability to anticipate danger had grown to the point where he could predict enemy movements days in advance. He studied star charts and tactical reports with an intensity that bordered on obsession, finding patterns that revealed the hidden logic behind Syndicate strategy. "The enemy is planning something big," he announced during the daily briefing. "They're pulling forces back from 3 different sectors and concentrating them in the Vega system. I think they're planning to make a stand there, using their most advanced weapons." Jake looked at the intelligence reports and tried to understand what the Syndicate was thinking. The logical response would be to avoid the Vega system and continue striking at isolated targets, but logic was not what had brought humanity this far. Sometimes the most dangerous path was also the most necessary. Amy Foster had become the fleet's strategic analyst, her mind processing information at speeds that challenged the most advanced computer systems. She could review battle reports from dozens of engagements and immediately identify the key factors that determined victory or defeat. "The Syndicate is making the same mistake that everyone makes when fighting humans," she explained to the assembled commanders. "They're trying to understand our tactics using their own logic. They think we're reckless because we take risks that they would never consider. But those risks are actually calculated decisions based on factors they can't comprehend." The human way of war was spreading throughout the galaxy like a virus, infecting other species with the same burning determination that had driven humanity since Earth's destruction. Allied forces were beginning to fight with the same desperate creativity that characterized human tactics, turning every battle into a contest of pure will. Tony Walsh and Sarah had established weapons laboratories on a dozen different ships, training alien engineers to think like humans when designing combat systems. Their students learned to see opportunity in malfunction, to find strength in apparent weakness, and to never accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. The culmination came at the Battle of Rigel Station, where the combined human-alien fleet faced off against the largest Syndicate force ever assembled. The enemy had 3 times as many ships and weapons that were individually superior to anything in the human arsenal. By every measure of military science, the battle should have resulted in complete human defeat. Instead, it became the turning point of the war. Using tactics that would be studied in military academies for centuries to come, human forces turned the enemy's numerical advantage against them, creating a chain reaction of destruction that eliminated the Syndicate's ability to conduct large-scale Operations. The galaxy watched in amazement as the species that had been dismissed as primitive savages systematically dismantled an empire that had dominated space for over 1,000 years. Humanity had not just survived the destruction of their world. They had used that destruction as the foundation for something greater than anyone had imagined possible. 5 years after Earth's destruction, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Terran Republic flagship and watched the construction of New Earth. The massive space station was being built at the exact coordinates where Earth had once orbited, a monument to human determination and a promise that some things could never be truly destroyed. The war with the Void Syndicate had ended not with a final battle, but with the complete collapse of their empire. The Syndicate leadership had fled to the dark spaces between galaxies, abandoning their territories rather than face the extinction that humanity promised to deliver. Their former subjects were either dead, scattered, or begging for mercy from the species they had once considered primitive. Pete Johnson had become the chief architect of human space technology, designing vessels and installations that combined the best of dozens of alien cultures with uniquely human innovations. His latest creation was the New Earth Station itself, a structure that could house millions of people, while serving as the capital of humanity's growing interstellar republic. Dorthiet. Station will be fully operational within 6 months, Pete reported as he reviewed the construction progress. We've incorporated defensive systems that could protect against anything short of a planet-killer weapon. And even then, the modular design means that most of the population could be evacuated within hours. Jake nodded as he watched the construction. Crews working around the clock. Humans and aliens labored side by side, united by a common purpose that transcended species boundaries. The Terran Republic had become something unprecedented in galactic history. A truly multi-species government based on principles of mutual protection and shared determination. Dr. Lisa Carter had published her complete research on human evolution, and the data was being studied by scientists throughout the galaxy. Her work revealed that humanity represented a unique evolutionary experiment, a species that had developed the ability to rapidly adapt under extreme stress, while maintaining the psychological resilience to never accept permanent defeat. The genetic changes we observed were not mutations, Lisa explained to the Galactic Science Council. They were dormant capabilities that had been present in human DNA for thousands of years, waiting for the right environmental trigger. The destruction of Earth activated evolutionary pathways that allowed humans to unlock their full potential. The implications were staggering. Other species had optimized themselves for specific environments or threats, becoming highly efficient, but inflexible. Humans had remained generalists, capable of adapting to any challenge through creativity, determination, and an absolute refusal to accept that any problem was unsolvable. Amy Foster had become the Republic's chief strategic planner, her analytical abilities now enhanced by computer implants that allowed her to process information at superhuman speeds. She was working on the long-term plans for human expansion and the integration of refugee populations from throughout the galaxy. We're not just rebuilding human civilization, she reported to the Senate. We're creating something entirely new, a society based on the principle that no species should ever have to face extinction alone. The Terran Republic will be a refuge for any civilization that needs protection from aggressors. The Senate itself was a marvel of interspecies cooperation. Representatives from 47 different worlds and cultures worked together to establish laws and policies that would govern the growing republic. The human senators were no longer refugees seeking charity. They were the acknowledged leaders of a movement that was reshaping galactic civilization. Maria Santos had become the Republic's Secretary of Alien Affairs, using her extraordinary ability to understand and motivate different cultures. Her work had been crucial in integrating the various species that were joining the human cause, helping them overcome centuries of mistrust and prejudice. The key to our success is not that we're stronger or smarter than other species, Maria explained to a gathering of new Senate members. It's that we refuse to let fear make our decisions for us. When other species see an impossible problem, they look for ways to avoid it. When humans see an impossible problem, we look for ways to solve it. The reconstruction of human colonies was proceeding faster than anyone had expected. Worlds that had been abandoned or destroyed were being terraformed, using techniques that combined human engineering with alien technology. Each new colony was designed to be self-sufficient and defensible, capable of surviving even if cut off from the rest of the Republic. Danny Clark had become the Republic's Director of Strategic Intelligence, his ability to predict threats and opportunities now enhanced by a network of scouts and analysts throughout the galaxy. His reports were studied by military commanders and political leaders who had learned to trust his insights about future developments. "The galaxy is entering a new era," Danny reported to the Leadership Council. "The old empires based on conquest and domination are collapsing, being replaced by voluntary associations of species that share common values. The Terran Republic is not just another government, it's the template for how civilizations will organize themselves for the next 1,000 years." General Robert Hayes had established the Republic Military Academy on New Earth, training officers from dozens of species in the tactical and strategic principles that had made human forces so effective. His students learned not just military techniques but the psychological attitudes that made victory possible, even in seemingly hopeless situations. "War is not about having the best weapons," Hayes taught his students. "It's about having the will to use whatever tools are available to achieve your objectives." Humans became dangerous not because we developed superior technology, but because we developed the mindset that no sacrifice was too great if it meant protecting what we valued. The memorial wall on New Earth listed the names of every human who had died in the destruction of Earth and the war that followed. The wall was 10 kilometers long and covered with millions of names, each one representing a life that had been lost and a future that had been stolen. But above the wall was an inscription that captured the essence of humanity's transformation. They thought destroying our world would break our spirit. Instead, it freed us to become what we were always meant to be. Nicole Green had become the commander of the Republic's exploration fleet, leading expeditions to the furthest reaches of known space. Her pilots were mapping new star systems and making contact with species that had never encountered galactic civilization. They carried with them not weapons of conquest, but offers of protection and alliance. Tony Walsh and Sarah had established the Republic Institute of Technology, where human and alien engineers worked together to develop innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Their laboratories were producing breakthrough discoveries in energy generation, faster-than-light travel, and planetary engineering that were revolutionizing life throughout the galaxy. The final chapter of humanity's transformation came when the Galactic Council formally disbanded itself and was replaced by the Federation of Free Worlds, a new organization based on the principles that the Terran Republic had pioneered. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through force. They had inspired it to become something better. Jake Morrison, now in his 60s but still sharp and determined, stood once again on the observation deck of his flagship and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the remnants of the Void Syndicate were probably planning their return, and other threats would certainly emerge in the years to come. But humanity was ready for whatever challenges the future might bring. They had learned the most important lesson that any species could master, that true strength comes not from avoiding destruction, but from refusing to let destruction be the end of the story. The galaxy had dismissed humans as primitive until the moment when primitiveness became their greatest advantage, proving that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is simply the refusal to give up.